Can beginners learn BJJ without drilling?
Like they're grappling. And they've never done it. Yeah. Our school is majority beginners.
It is by far better for me to work with someone brand new.
I actually find it better to find students who are brand new.
What you want to do is you want to give them a very specific game.
The more you restrain a game, the more a new person is able to learn from it.
I'm being very specific. We don't drill.
To try to understand this, I attended a class at a BJJ gym that doesn't drill. Ever since a shoulder injury that shot me down a rabbit hole to understand the best way to learn jiu-jitsu, I've been on a journey for weeks to understand if students can train BJJ and even get good without drilling a single move. My first stop was at Standard Jiu Jitsu in Maryland, run by Greg Souders, where they follow the ecological approach. And then I flew to New Jersey to check out a second school that does the same thing. Yesterday, I saw Bodega's pro training class run by Kyvann Gonzalez. But now I'm interested in a class that has students from all walks of life, from the advanced players to the everyday hobbyist, to even the complete day one white belt beginner with no prior training. I want to see this for myself, given that some people believe the approach may only benefit more advanced students who already know fundamental jiu-jitsu. What does this approach look like in practice? Well, I only have one more day here in New Jersey to find out. As the students arrived, tonight's instructor Kyvann set up the TV to list out the games that the class would play today.
Not again, dude.
It's happening again.
What's the IT department, baby?
What are you hooking up the Apple TV for?
Yeah, it's just so I can put like a timer on. I can put up like what we're working on, trying to be bougie, you know?
So now you got 2 timers.
yeah. You know what? Don't come with that energy, Josh. This is the future, all right, Josh? The future is now, okay? Oh shit, I messed it up. Good training. If you guys know this is Josh, let's just show him what's up. All right, put together. Let's start jogging. Nice and easy. I think I got the Apple TV working.
Drilling. So I'm a huge fan of drilling.
What are we talking about when we talk about drilling? It's a very vague term. The majority of what passes for drilling in most training halls will not make you better. Repetition for numbers. That's not the point of drilling. The point is skill acquisition. When you fight in competition, there's 100% resistance. You can't go from 0 to 100. There has to be progress over time. I have them work in drills with slightly increasing increments of resistance. They work with mechanics and feel. Drilling is a cooperative venture where you work as dance partners, complementing each other's movement.
I'm being very specific. We don't drill.
And neither do Kyvann and his students, so what do they do instead?
Officer Grimy wants to know why you call this ecological when it's actually just games.
Grimy, I told him we do ecological, and he goes, "What's that?" I said, "We play games." And he was like, "I'm ecological." He's like, "All I do is play games."
At Bodega, students don't drill moves. Instead, they do small games that look like situational sparring, but the design is more nuanced, based on the theory of ecological dynamics. I did a video with Greg Souders on how he designs games for students, which is linked below. The core idea here is to build skills that get movement solutions to emerge, rather than trying to replicate solutions. More on that later. After a quick warm-up, Kyvann began explaining the first of 6 games.
The game is called Ducks and Drags, so I want you to think about ducking and dragging their arm. So we're playing this game from head and arm position, meaning locked up, okay, like locking horns, right? For the majority of this game, I want one hand or 2 hands on the neck, or 1 hand or 2 hands on the wrist. So our job is to always have more hands on them than they have on us. Our task for both of us is to get underneath or behind their elbows for the sake of trying to get to their back. We move back and forth. We're both trying to get to this position of maybe Chaz gets underneath my elbow, and then I just get back into position. Maybe I get underneath his elbow, and we get back into position. He gets behind me, and I get back in position. And the game continues until the timer ends. Give it a try at 3. 1, 2, 3.
Everyone began playing the game, exploring ways to get under or behind the elbows. This is a difficult task to accomplish, and Kyvann's role here was to keep their attention directed properly.
Remember your task. Get underneath or behind the elbows. Stay connected, stay connected.
like they're grappling. And they've never done it. Yeah. That's the craziest part about this. Give the same objective to anyone at the lowest level, highest level, and they find a way to make it work.
Though they did look like they were grappling, I hadn't seen anything magic yet. Though, to be fair, I'm sure that'd be the case for day one beginners in any type of class. In theory, since ecological dynamics is just a theory of human movement, there should be no reason it wouldn't work for beginners. It should work for anyone and for any sport. But some people still push against this, essentially arguing that jiu-jitsu is like a pyramid, and you must learn in a linear fashion, starting with fundamental techniques at the bottom of the pyramid and working up towards more complex ones. This is called linear pedagogy, and it's the opposite of what we're trying to do here. Pedagogy, most commonly understood as the approach to teaching, is the theory and practice of learning. Linear pedagogy has a fixed order of steps where you want to learn to repeat a movement with minimal variation, whereas non-linear pedagogy is all about function and effect, and it doesn't matter how you achieve success or in which order you learn movements. In this philosophy, there are no fundamental techniques you learn first, but rather you learn invariant properties, and all other behaviors self-organize. We'll talk about what invariants are in a bit because all this verbiage can be quite confusing, but it has a drastic impact on the training.
If he does this, he wins.
Kit Dale is an elite competitor and received his black belt in just under 5 years. He rose through the ranks training with what he now terms task-based games, and he teaches students this way as well. There's a lot of crossover with the constraints-led approach.
It is by far better for me to work with someone brand new than what it is me, someone that's already been indoctrinated into the technique style of learning, by far.
Chris Hendricks is a black belt instructor at JG Academy in Meridian, Idaho, and he also implements the constraints-led approach.
I actually find it better to find students who are brand new and haven't trained at all. It's a lot easier. You don't have to break bad habits, or they don't have this preconceived notion of what jiu-jitsu is or what it's supposed to be.
Our school is majority beginners. Like I would say 80% beginners, 20% experience. A guy comes off the street, day one, he's like, I've never done jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I'm going to explain these games for you. Know the tasks. They have no idea how to do jiu-jitsu. And within moments, it looks like they're doing jiu-jitsu.
Problem is, jiu-jitsu is so complex, you can easily find it overwhelming for a new person to come in and say, what am I trying to do? In this position, you try and do this. And then when you get in this position, you try and do this. I mean, the goal is ultimately all you're trying to do is tap that person out and not get tapped out. That's all you're trying to do.
We play the game of immobilization as it leads to strangulation and breaking. So every time we make and maintain connections to manage distance, to do something to our opponent, we're always considering what is going to increase the level of immobility in the system so that our opponent becomes more strangleable and more breakable.
If you know what you're supposed to do to shoot a three-pointer, does that mean you can shoot a three-pointer? Keep your elbow in, make sure you follow through. Everyone knows what to do. Why can't you make the three-pointer? And it's because you're not doing the actual exercise. You're not actually learning knowledge of doing it. I bet you know exactly what you're supposed to do in these scenarios. Why am I beating you in those scenarios? And it's not because I know more than you. For a beginner, I think it could become cumbersome. It could become overwhelming. How many times have you heard a white belt come back to class and be like, I'm in here and I saw Danaher's DVD and he said to do these 3. Which one should I do? And you're like, either you make up the answer, which I see all the time, like, oh, just do this in that scenario. What if they do that? Well, then just do the, no, spend time from that exact situation.
Yeah, what they're doing is they're looking at jiu-jitsu wrong. They're thinking of the progression in jiu-jitsu as the accumulation of techniques. What you want to do is you want to give them a very specific game, a task-based game that allows them the confidence to actually try and solve the task and put it at a level of difficulty that they can do it.
The more you restrain a game, the more a new person is able to learn from this. When you narrow the constraints so much down that they don't have to think of what's next or what's before, they develop that skill unknowingly.
You're teaching their bodies to figure out how to move rather than teaching them how to think about
The first thing in jiu-jitsu is
Right.
learning how to move.
We can start with my hands wrapped around their hips, and again, I don't want to be high up on the body to start because that's cheating. I'm starting as low as the hips as possible. Chaz can face away from me, or he can face towards me. It doesn't matter. His legs just have to be to the outside of my body, okay? My job as the top player is to get a chest-to-chest connection or a chest-to-back connection. But when I get my chest-to-chest connection, I want to think about getting behind or underneath the elbows In my opinion, I really like getting underneath the elbows, and then I want to cover the hips. What I mean by covering the hips is controlling the hips. This could be one of those versions. Complete mount can be one of those versions. And I call this one vegan mount can be one of those versions, as long as I'm controlling their hips. We call it vegan mount because it's like sort of, but not really. And then if he's facing away from me, the other way I can win is by getting a chest to back connection with my hands connected around him. And we win by inserting one hook. All that means is one leg in between their legs. Chaz's job is to face me and get his feet in front and in between us. He could do this in the seated position. He could also do this in the standing position. Maybe he starts to get to his feet, get up on top, and then he faces me. There's two more ways that Chaz can win. If maybe in this interaction, he gets me into half guard, which means my leg in between his legs. If he does this, he wins. He can also win by getting his legs completely around me if he gets to close guard. On three, 1, 2, 3.
In the previous game, both players had the same exact win conditions. Get under or behind the elbows to get to the back. In this game, however, the conditions are more uneven, and the players win in ways that are different from one another. Like here, Ness is able to get her feet back in front of her partner to win. And in this example, another student is able to get chest to chest and cover the hips. The beginner students were figuring it out too.
The new guys are doing it. He got deep underhooks and mounted him.
Did he really? Yeah, and with almost no English, so I don't even know how they figured. They just looked and figured it out. He was like, I think we won, but I'm not sure. And then I had to explain. Isn't that crazy? Se bien. So this game for right now is just starting with the seatbelt. The entire objective is just keep this chest to back connection as long as possible. I'm not allowed to puncture hooks. If he escapes my hands and faces me, we flip-flop top and bottom. On three, 1, 2, 3.
This game represents a common scenario in jiu-jitsu where you're going to take the back but need to maintain the chest to back connection before you put hooks in. We're isolating a very specific skill, and it forces the players to be creative in the ways that they maintain the connection or try to escape the connection. Since there's no threat of hooks going in, which would immediately and completely change the scenario, you have way more time than in a normal roll to explore this position. The density of time spent working through a very constrained area of the game is so much more than what you'd find in a typical practice with drilling, situational sparring, and live rolls.
It makes you think, did we overcomplicate jiu-jitsu, dude? You can teach people stuff so much easier.
I love Fermi problems, like how many pianos exist in San Francisco. You can get surprisingly accurate with your assumptions. So let's do a back-of-the-envelope calculation for how often you'd spend time on someone's back without hooks in a typical class. Let's say you do 3 6-minute rounds of live sparring at the end of a traditional class after drilling. You failed to take the back in the first round because your partner turned belly up, so you took mount. And then in the second 2 rounds, you managed to actually take the back with hooks. In the first round, you spent 3 seconds on the back with just an upper body connection and no hooks. The same thing we're doing in this game. In the last 2 rounds, you spent a total of 4 seconds before you punctured the first hook. That's 7 seconds in a day. If we extrapolate that to 3 classes per week and 4 weeks per month and 52 weeks per year, well, that's a grand total of 18.2 minutes training that scenario. Now, with this constraints-led game, let's say you managed to spend even just 2 minutes out of the 6-minute round maintaining chest-to-back connection. Extrapolating over the same time period, we get almost 312 minutes building this skill. The difference in training density is astounding. We moved on to game 4, where the idea was to prevent the attacking player from throwing in a second hook, but the attacking player was not allowed to do any strangles or other submissions. I was a bit concerned here. Were we building bad habits by allowing the bottom player to defend the hook in a way that would leave them open to submissions like arm locks and strangles? Or is it also a question of whether we're building skills to get the hook in or the skills to defend the hook? I asked Kyvann about this later. What do you say if someone says that'll build bad habits for the person defending the hook? Is it because the game is built for the player who is trying to throw the hook in? Or am I looking at this wrong? One of the requirements is that the defending player keep 1 or 2 hands on the defending arm at all times. If I missed that, it's because I was nervous. Ah, gotcha, cool. But attacking player is still not actively attempting to strangle, just trying to throw the second hook. Yes.
you doing up there?
On the topic of building bad habits, I got to speak with a couple really good black belts at my coach Greg Souders' house recently.
I'm Nicholas Salas. I'm a first-degree black belt under Mikey Musumeci. Me and Danny, we own a school called Movement Art in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, my name is Danny Myra. Same thing as Nick. I'm a first-degree black belt under Mikey Musumeci.
So my name is Greg Souders, black belt, and I own ADCC Jiu Jitsu here in Atlanta, Georgia.
The way we see Jiu-Jitsu is that it's an intellectual game, and it just so happens to be played out physically. There is explicit information that is black and white, can be proven, can be stress tested, and it can be taught.
So now his consciousness is focused on that. He keeps drilling, he's thinking about his heel, but what's going on with the wrist? Is he doubling up on the wrist or is he forgetting that? Then it's too easy. No problem.
Okay, it's pretty clear they're more on the information processing side, and I will be posting the entire interview with them because they make a lot of great arguments and they're really, really good at jiu-jitsu. But despite differences in viewpoints, we all could at least agree on one thing. I think the fear is that if you just throw a beginner into like the eco approach, then they're going to build a bunch of bad habits because they don't know what's happening. You're not giving them these fundamental techniques.
They're going to build bad habits anyway, though. Like, let's be honest. Jiu-jitsu is really about just adding good habits. I mean, I don't know if that's a really good argument to be that critical of the eco approach.
This reminded me of an eco class I saw at my friend Denny's gym called BAME Jiu Jitsu in Fremont, California.
I'm not even rolling, I'm sweating out here.
Yeah.
My friends Randy and Al were running it, and I got to experience the constraints-led approach firsthand for the very first time. We got to a series of arm lock games, and one student had some concerns about one that involved trying to escape an arm lock without the top player trying to finish it, but instead just hold control of the position.
Is there any danger when you're training in a position where like someone's not allowed to submit, that you're like learning bad behavior? For example, like getting out of an armbar, when I know they're not allowed to armbar, I can do things that I wouldn't be able to do in a real
Yeah,
world.
that's a constraint. We're giving you a constraint so that way both of you guys can learn on the top and the bottom. Is it a bad behavior? No, but if you can't, okay, an example, on top, if you can't maintain that position right there, maybe there's something else to look into.
Teaching my body to escape that way,
Like,
then I'm going to do that in a roll.
Making it a habit
Yeah.
because of the escape.
That's what
it benefited
my
you.
fear would be.
I see.
It seems she still wasn't convinced, but there was one student who felt like he got something out of the experience.
Jaden, Randy, how long you been rolling?
2 months.
2 months?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's tough.
I think it's really fun.
Yeah.
I think like this approach definitely. Like I definitely like the idea behind it. I feel like I learned like different maneuvers in a certain scenario, like ways I can get out of something. Like for example, like if somebody's trying to take my back, more than knowing just one thing, like one technique, I can like figure out different techniques out of getting that move. Or like just one basic concept of like focus on that concept and get it out like position, right? I get to a different position. Yeah. At first I was confused, but as soon as I started exploring new things, I was like, it like started to make more sense. But like, I feel like due to the time constriction, I wasn't able to explore enough in like each scenario.
The whole ecological approach is you try something, you see the feedback, and then you adjust continually. So
Yeah.
it's cool. It was a good experience for us to see where we're at, and we're able to sort of like reflect and make it better for the next time. And that's really what it's about. This is my first time with this big of a group. I'm usually doing this with like 2 to 3 people, and I'm able to control the variables a little bit more.
Going back to the whole thing about building bad habits, I'm not sure if I was completely satisfied with the answers I got either, so I turned to Greg Souders for his thoughts as well.
When it comes to developing skilled behavior, bad habits don't really exist. There are bad training protocols, there are bad training methodologies, bad training strategies, but bad habits don't really exist. Anytime we start to do something new, we start off doing it wrongly, ineffectively, inefficiently. And it's over time that we attune to specifying information that allows us to coordinate a movement solution. So think about this critically. If bad habits did exist, and those habits would then produce future bad habits. So all beginners have bad habits. And if that were the case, then how does a beginner ever get out of beginner land? Why are they not stuck perpetually in this series of bad behaviors? Remember, things we do wrongly are necessary to guide us towards things we'd like to do rightly.
This is future Josh here editing this video. I had a bit of trouble with this sequence just because I wasn't totally sure how to explain the thing about bad habits, and it went in a lot of different directions, but after recording this video and training like this for weeks now, it's clear to me that constraints are just there to help you explore the area and build different skills. So if I want to build a skill that's different than the one that's being focused on in the current game, then we should either just play a different game or change the constraints. It's really that simple. Speaking of arm locks, another common question is whether beginners using this approach will actually learn things like arm locks and strangles, or any other submission really, or whether these will just be expected to magically emerge through the games. But we'll talk more about that later, so stick around. With the class almost coming to an end, we had time for 2 more games, which involved putting the players closer to what we'd call a terminal point. In this case, a strangle from the back.
Yeah, show her, Jemmer. Show her, Jemmer. Let's go. Time.
And with that, class was over.
Let's just talk about the progression. We started with ducks and drags. I find a way underneath or behind his elbows for the purpose of getting to their back. If I get to here and create some sort of a mat return, I get him to the floor. Now we're playing our second game, creating a chest and back position. Once I get here, now we're playing our third game, keeping him between my knees as long as possible. Then we play our fourth game, getting the hooks. Now that I've got my fourth game, we're playing our last game, trying to get underneath the neck. And the final game is finishing the choke. Just think of that progression when you're self-organizing your own game, right? In every position in jiu-jitsu, play the game. Don't just do these games and let them like leave and think it was fun. Remember how you organize yourself in the game, all right, guys? 3 clap, 1, 2, 3.
Before we get into the question of teaching arm locks and strangles versus these things just magically emerging, I want to talk to you real quick about momentous supplements. I've personally used Momentous for a while to support my BJJ competition journey of over 66 tournaments so far at Blue Belt, and they use some of the best ingredients, the latest science, and third-party certification. Some of my favorites are the creatine that I use for my brain and my muscles, and these collagen peptides for joint support. And you can use code JOSHBEAM for 15% off, and the link is in the description. So, does the ecological approach work for beginners? Before we answer that, let's talk about a common misconception that goes something along the lines of, if you're not teaching beginners things like arm locks and strangles, how are they supposed to learn anything? Well, it turns out those are taught. The things that don't change in jiu-jitsu are referred to as invariants. And Kyvann and Greg Souders and all the other coaches all teach breaking mechanics, which is an example of an invariant, because there's really only a few ways to break a joint or cause strangulation. Greg actually posted his entire arm lock progression for free on YouTube. And you can also see an interesting snippet about leg attacks in a video with Nate Cho. The caveat here is that they're not going to actually teach, say, 20 different solutions for getting to an arm lock, but rather they'll teach the skills involved in an arm lock, like separating the hands, controlling the posture, things like that. Joshua Richards talks about that in this video with Noah, one of Greg's students. And the links for all of these videos are in the description. Anyway, based on these classes I've seen, it appears the ecological approach does build skills for beginners, just like it does for more advanced people in jiu-jitsu. I personally haven't seen it on a long enough time horizon, but from an anecdotal standpoint, we can turn to Greg Souders and Chris Hendricks, both of whom are happy to talk to me about some of their star students. Noah over at Greg's gym, Standard Jiu Jitsu, is a perfect example.
So how many years has it been since you started training and got your purple belt?
3 years and 4 months, 3 years and 5 months.
Yeah, I mean, over COVID, like I didn't do anything or have any friends or anything, so I just sat inside and watched YouTube videos all day, and then I ended up getting more into like combat sports specifically. But I just like called a bunch of schools that were in the area to see like when they were doing classes, and this was the first one I came to. I didn't really have any interest in going anywhere else after training here.
Secretly, I go to Gracie Baja on the weekends and learn all the forbidden techniques.
Yeah, but in all seriousness though, have you attended like outside seminars or
so
anything?
At this point, I recently drilled for the first time. It was a pretty rough experience. Yeah, it was like the most unproductive, like mind-numbing experience ever. Like they are literally just subject to tradition. Like, you know, that's the only reason they think it works is because somebody told them it works.
Also, just based on the theory of ecological dynamics, there should be no reason that it shouldn't work for all people. And the only reason we're defending this in the first place is because people say it shouldn't work. But based on what? I'm not totally sure. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested in implementing the constraints-led approach for yourself or for others, check out this video I did with Greg Souders where he teaches me how to design games. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.